of Management Studies website. Okay. Okay, so first of all, I want to say welcome to the session on behalf of the special editorial team and on behalf of Journal of Management Studies. So as you know, the session today is about artificial intelligence and organizational theory. And we're really excited to launch this special issue because we think this is an exciting topic. I did a quick look at the Academy of Management sessions from the other week, and I was pretty surprised to see there were over 63 sessions that had some kind of association with artificial intelligence. So whether that was just being a paper delivered in a session or a plenary specifically dedicated to AI. So it's clearly a topic that's captured quite a lot of attention over recent times. That's why we think this is a really good time to launch this special issue to hopefully get some conversation within the organisational management field. So today what we're going to do is give you a rough overview of the special issue, a high-level overview. We'll hopefully go into a bit more detail than in the call that you might have received. We'll introduce the editorial team. We'll talk about the process with our colleagues from Journal of Management Studies. And then most importantly, what we're here to do is to give you a chance to ask any questions that you might have that weren't immediately obvious in the call. So that's the format of today. And at any time, if you've got a question, just put it in the chat and we'll try and answer it. Okay, so just a quick hello from the team. I'm Dominic Chalmers from University of Glasgow. If you don't understand what I'm saying, it's because I'm from Scotland and I speak very fast. I'm trying my best to slow down, but you know how excited you get when you're talking online. So please don't hesitate to put a note in the conversation saying slow down, and I'm trying my best. My interest in AI really kind of emerged 3 or 4 years ago, and it led to publishing a paper in EDP about how artificial intelligence has been used to shape early stage venture processes and scaling. I'll pass over to my colleague Rick from Virginia Tech.
Hi folks, I'm Rick Hunt, Associate Professor at Virginia Tech at Strategy and Entrepreneurship. I was born west of the Mississippi River, so we speak about 10 words a minute. And so the average between me and Dom is going to be a bullseye, I'm sure, for folks. And along with a close colleague, collaborated on many works, David Townsend, who'll follow along here in a sec, that we've had a multi-year collaboration on facets of AI and ML, have a number of students embarking upon dissertation work in those areas. And we're particularly interested in trying to make sure that we go deep on understanding the conceptual and societal implications of this. Couldn't be more excited to see the international array of folks who have rolled in for this particular session. And pass it on over to David.
Oh, yeah, maybe Stella can go right after me. But yeah, as Rick mentioned, we've got a lot of close collaboration on a variety of AI topics. So it's a topic that's exciting and certainly relevant to the broader organizational sciences. I would say Rick and I are about 30 feet away from each other. But instead of sitting in front of the same computer we thought would be awkward, we are in our individual offices. But we are intensely jealous of Stella. She probably has the most stellar, if you will, location among the editorial team here. But again, we'll kind of talk through the mechanics, some of the ideas, things that we find interesting. But really the goal today is to be very inclusive in terms of how we view AI and organizations and the type of manuscripts that might be relevant. It's an exciting time. I think there are multiple ways that these articles can be constructed, as we'll get into. But really glad you all are here. I know there's pretty intense interest in this. There are people that are still having some trouble getting into the session. So I know I've had a couple emails. I'm sending the link out. But if any of you get emails from your friends, I'm going to put the link again in the chat. You're welcome to email it to any colleagues you know are wanting to attend. who haven't been able to get in. So again, any questions, put it in the chat. We'll all try to answer those, but we look forward to chatting more specifics here in just a minute. But Stella, over to you.
Thanks very much, David. And no worries. I thought it was a natural flow, actually, for you to speak after next to Rick, basically. My location last week was more exotic than what it is now, but I'm not complaining. It's not bad. I'm in Greece right now. So my interest in AI, I think it's related to my broader interest in algorithmic technologies and how they specifically affect knowledge work. I have an article, for example, in the Organizational Science looking at the implementation of data analytics technology in sales and how it changed, how it transformed the regime of knowing in sales. I was in a very lucky position to be the guest editor of another special issue on artificial intelligence, which was specifically for the information systems community. And that was quite interesting because it was a double special issue of the Association for Information Systems, which is our sort of like more theory journal in IS, and the MISQ Executive Journal, which is a practitioner-oriented journal. So we invited dual submissions there, which had a theoretical contribution on the one article and more of a practical contribution on managerial implications on the other, which was interesting. And I'm really excited to be here and working together with Dominic, David, Rick, and Christina on this special issue. It's really nice to see so much interest, and I'm really looking forward to interacting further about paper ideas. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And last but not least, I'll pass over to Christina, who is representing the journal in the process.
Thank you so much, Dominic. So hi, everyone. My name is Christina Potočnik. I'm a professor of organizational behavior in Edinburgh. So, you know, my accent, as you can tell, is not Scottish, but it is influenced by all sorts of other European languages. So I do hope I'm making myself clear on this call. If I'm not, as Dominic said earlier, do put it on the chat. So my interest in artificial intelligence is mainly related with people management, as that is my background and expertise. And as Dominic said, at JMS, we do have quite an established process in terms of how we manage articles for regular issues, but also for special issues. And Dominic, if it's okay, I think Margaret is also on the call, and I think it'd be very good if Margaret can also introduce herself, as she is the key. She's our editorial manager based in Durham. Margaret, are you on the call?
Hi, Christina. Yes, hi, I'm Margaret. I'm the editorial manager for the Journal of Management Studies, so I will be assisting with any of the process and operational aspects of the special issue.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what I also wanted to do very quickly was just share some of the key dates that we have. So as you know, the submission is on the 1st of August 2023. But what we're keen to do is try and build a bit of community around this topic area. So what we're going to offer is a pre-submission workshop in the autumn of 2022. And that's really an opportunity for you to discuss some early stage ideas and get some feedback in them. And then what we're hoping to do after the first submission is do a post-submission workshop where you'll get more detailed feedback. And we're hoping to arrange a mini conference around that in Washington, DC. So I'll just reiterate that it's absolutely not mandatory for you to attend any of these, and it won't affect any of the decisions that we make. But we hope you'll agree it would be good to meet up with other scholars working in this area. And again, we hope to get some good speakers in from for the mini conference that we'll be running as well. So more information about them will be released in due course. So again, today what we're going to do, we're going to go through each of the 4 different areas that we're asking for papers in, and we'll go into more detail, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions about any of the areas that you're interested in. Christina's also going to present just a little bit more information about the journal, in case you're not familiar. So we've got quite a kind of wide interest from many different fields, because of the kind of interdisciplinary nature of this call. So I think it might be useful just to know a little bit more about what the Journal of Management Studies is and what it stands for. We'll move on first of all to the first research topic area, and that's David.
Right, thanks, Dominic. Again, we're all going to kind of tackle one of the major areas, within the call. And I would say loosely, in terms of our editorial, the organization of our guest editorial team is will be sort of, focused in on some of these areas, but it's not to say that there might be manuscripts, of course, that blend or connect across these areas. And so again, it's interdisciplinary topic. We, would love to see interdisciplinary research. And so the goal here, again, is to be very inclusive in how we address these topics. So the first area is really focused on this question of, enhancing our theoretical understanding of AI in organizations. And those of you, I know many of you know the history of AI, field of artificial intelligence, term was coined at a conference at Dartmouth in the late 1950s that Herb Simon actually attended. And sort of the exciting part about that is, instead of coming to talk about AI in theory, he and one of his colleagues actually built a rudimentary kind of early stage AI tool called the Logic Theorist. And so, it's like showing up to an AOM or an SMS or Babson conference, not with a paper, but with an actual functioning technology. But, he was early in that, and he was sort of this, we all know, this polymath who really blended multiple areas. And so, kind of the founder of really, or the emergence of the field of AI, and then also, of course, has a massive impact on the emergence of organization theory really over the last 100 years. So there's these deep historical roots, but of course, these fields have split a bit. And so we think there's really exciting opportunity to start to think about what are the new theories of organized intelligence. There's an emerging research stream that is really addressing the topic of organized intelligence, but specific to how does AI impact organization theory, the way we theorize about, at fundamentally, organizational levels, micro levels with people, to societal levels, environmental levels. And so there's, again, multiplicity of ways that we can view AI. So I'm going to talk about a couple of questions just to be more provocative. But again, our goal here is to be very inclusive. But to me, a great example of the transformative impact of AI is a company called In Silico Medicine. And so it's a startup company. It's recently been purchased by a Chinese firm, but it's a spin out from Johns Hopkins University here in the United States. And it's basically using an end-to-end AI system to design new therapeutics. So drugs that can cure different or treat different human diseases. And it's had just massive impact in this space. And so they have a recent study they just published. They identified 30,000 possible therapeutics to treat fibrosis. And again, just in a very short time period, we're talking about hours. And then they went through a screening process and actually designed a therapeutic from that, identified 7 down to 1 that they put in clinical trials. And from end to end, this process took less than 50 days. For those of you who've worked in the space, that's just an extraordinary transformation of this process. And so this idea of taking drug discovery from years to reducing it to days is just an extraordinary achievement. And AI is transforming organizations across many other arenas. And so the question really is, what are the new organizational theories, if you will, of AI? And so these theories of organized intelligence, we have emerging research streams around human-machine networks, right? How do you connect humans and machines in organizational processes? Questions about algorithmic choice, what kind of decisions should machines be making, or augmented human judgment, right? Should machines just be assisting, helping humans make decisions? There's a recent paper, if you follow AMR at all, recent paper that basically is theorizing this idea of a conjoined agency. And Alex's paper did win the top AMR paper from 2021, just again, really put a stamp on the interest that people have. And so again, theories of organized intelligence is an important topic. There's also questions about the epistemic limits of knowledge creation, integration, exploitation, transfer, both within and across organizations. To that end, does AI, fundamentally erase the limits that we have, because, now we're not limited to human knowledge or human understanding of things. As machines become more and more intelligent, does that erase those limits, or does it channel it into particular things that can be computed or codified using computational strategies? What are the boundary conditions of that? Is clearly an important question for us. And then, how is AI transforming the experience of humans within organizations? And so you can think about, theories of organizational trust or mistrust, even organizational citizenship behaviors. How is the social environment, the commitment, the relationship that employees have with each other and organizations transformed by the presence or infusion of AI within organizations. And so again, there's lots of important questions at multiple levels of analysis around this. But yeah, Dominic, you can go next slide. So again, within that, again, on that particular perspective, other questions about how the penetration of AI across different industries, organizational functions, impacting these micro-level theories of organizing and work. But again, there's this trade-off between how do managers even manage algorithms, making choices about when and where and how to deploy algorithms within different organizational processes is important. But again, there's some recent work, those of you who know there's a great ASQ paper on this, about humans being managed by algorithms. And so as we infuse AI into organizations, and then the AI is allocating tasks, resources, monitoring employee behavior, interviewing potential employees, right? I mean, how AI itself is used to connect humans or to arrange or dictate or govern how humans work within organizations. They're really critical, important questions for us to address along those lines. And then what are and this is, I'll say, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. What are some new insights that organizational scholars can offer regarding the possibility, but potentially the effective limits of machine agency and autonomy, right? And so I think there's room for us as organizational scholars to critique the possibilities of machine agency. And those of you who follow some of the philosophical literature, there's intense skepticism, right? And it bleeds into culture as people say, you've got kind of the AI skeptics say AI is never going to be able to do, some task, right? That's always going to be something that humans can do. And then others who are the kind of the AI promoters are constantly highlighting breakthrough technologies. And so at the heart of that is this question about what kind of agentic capacities do computational systems really have. But I think an interesting question tied to that is the more we use these probabilistic engines, once you understand the construction of these decision engines within machine learning or deep learning, right, maybe the question is much more banal than we assume, because really, if you're given a machine probabilistic, given the capacity to make probabilistic judgments, you're granting agency where you don't necessarily think that machine would necessarily have true agency within a system. And so within that, I think there's this paradoxical tension between people that think about AI as this hyper rationality versus these more creative modes of AI. What I call Promethean creativity is just the kind of breakthrough insights because the system is not constrained by human values, potentially, or human ethics. And so there are deep, incredible possibilities of deep problems with this perspective as well. So again, just a broad view of some topics that we all find interesting, but again, we're inclusive, lots of room to theorize the role of AI within organization theory.
Yes. So I think, obviously, I guess it's already sort of like visible that there's definitely overlap, I think, in the interests. I think the difference would be in terms of exploring certain issues and questions theoretically or empirically, obviously with the hope that we are contributing back to theory through the empirical understanding, right? But there's definitely lots that we can and that I think we as org theorists should explore actually when it comes to AI and work and how AI is experienced by workers in organizations. For people who may have participated in recent conferences, for example, in the Academy of Management meeting, there were lots of very interesting presentations that were good evidence that AI is having an impact in a variety of organizational contexts, from very traditional contexts with tasks that we sort of already know that they can be automated and or augmented, to more extreme settings, like, for example, the police, sports, and sports organizations. And it would be, I think, obviously AI, the application of AI is it incorporates so many different types of tools and techniques. It can affect so many different areas that I think the plurality of organizational context is important and necessary, because we are likely to see the impacts unfolding in different ways depending on the context in which the technology is implemented. And again, so there's variety in context as well as specifically in types of tasks and organizational processes that are being automated and or augmented by the technology. And we've already seen, we know that there's definitely positive impact that can be gained, as much as unintended or even perverse effects. And the effect can be for the people who directly use the technology, as much as for others, right? So it depends on what kind of area you're looking at. If you're looking at, for example, AI being used to support decision making, the question is how are the decision makers affected by the technology, as much as people who may be affected by the decisions as well. So again, there's a large range of different areas on which empirical studies could focus in order to develop an understanding of how workers at different places in the organization are experiencing the effects of artificial intelligence technology. And obviously, we are looking again for plurality of methodologies. I think we are inclusive when it comes to both qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods approaches. And I have put together here some key areas. The list is non-exhaustive and the categorization is relatively broad, I would say. One key question is when it comes to the nature of work, right? So how is the implementation of AI changing the nature of work? How is it changing the work for the workers who are directly interacting with the tool, whose certain tasks may be automated or whose tasks may be augmented, as well as how is that affecting other workers in the workplace? I'm thinking, for example, especially when AI tools are implemented to affect the performance, to the evaluation of performance, or the management, the coordination of tasks in the organization. It could be affecting the nature of work in a variety of ways. So there's interesting examples of how, for example, it may be affecting the judgment processes, like, for example, how doctors make diagnoses, how people create and use knowledge in the organization, how people make decisions, as well as how, I would say, people learn to work with the AI tool, or I suggested also how they learn to work for the AI tool as well. And then another interesting area would be to look at how AI is affecting people's expertise as well as the development of expertise. I have been doing, for example, some research in law firms, and there's lots of interesting transformations when it comes to the implementation of such technologies in the law context, in the legal context, because usually the tools are implemented to take over repetitive and mundane tasks that would be usually performed by junior lawyers. So the question would be, well, how do those junior lawyers get trained? How do they develop their expertise when the routine tasks through which they would learn how to be a lawyer, they are automated? So this question of how do occupational entrants, let's say, develop their expertise as lots of the work that would be traditionally done by humans is taken over by the AI technology. How is it affecting their individual capabilities and their development of individual capabilities if they are becoming, for example, increasingly reliant on automation tools or on insights produced automatically by AI tools? How is their creativity used, as well as how are professionals, let's say, finding ways to deal with those, to cope with those transformations? Are they developing alternative career paths and trajectories, for example? Again, I will mention the legal context. We see lots of lawyers developing new types of trajectories. They develop they learn to develop data science skills themselves. They acquire those skills and they join low-tech startups, for example, rather than following the traditional lawyer career trajectory. So I would say also how are jurisdictional boundaries restructured, right? So when we bring AI tools in organizations, how are professions eventually affected? And then I've written sort of like relationships, thinking more of a more relational approach, but there's lots of things that I've been thinking about how, let's say, the implementation and use of AI technology can be affecting the work environment in terms of power structures changing, questions such as how workers experience new forms of control, how are they reacting to those new forms of control, how do their practices and processes of coordination or collaboration transform when there's AI tools that either take over certain tasks, or when AI tools are seen as collaborators, as members of a team, or when AI tools are implemented in order to coordinate the work. It depends obviously on the area of application, but there would be lots of interesting aspects that we could be exploring about the workplace and how people in the workplace are experiencing the AI technology. And maybe one last thing that I would like to clarify, obviously a lot of those questions, they could be asked, I think, about any kind of technology, right? It wouldn't necessarily have to be about AI. So personally, I would be particularly interested in trying to understand what it is particularly about AI that is causing those transformations mentioned here, and trying to think of also then how do those empirical insights are affecting how we think about management and organizing, and how we think about work. What are the broader implications eventually about our theorizing, basically. I think that's about it. Should I pass it over to Rick then, Dominic?
I think it's me next.
Oh, okay.
Thanks very much, Stella. Yeah, so the third area that we're looking at is a bit of a change of course, and really it's digging back into some of the kind of philosophy and the moral philosophy of AI as it's experienced in organizations. So this entails a move towards studying how AI should be used to achieve specific organizational ends. Now, what I find quite interesting looking over all of this work is that there's been quite a lot of interest in how AI is experienced in organizations, but almost none of it has been done by organizational scholars. So if you look in journals like Nature Machine Intelligence, Data and Society, the Digital Humanities, Science and Technology Studies, a lot of these fields have had really, really quite interesting insights into how organizations and individuals in organizations experience AI, but they've not drawn in many of the theories that a lot of us would know. So I think hopefully within this special issue, it's a chance for organization and management scholars to reassert their domain expertise by reflecting back and interpreting AI within our kind of paradigm. Now, what I would really like to see is that we focus on pressing practical problems. So one of the things that's quite compelling about other fields is how important the work is to practitioners. So I think there's a huge opportunity here to get out there and speak to people, the developers and the engineers in the field, speak to them about what issues they have. Effectively, these guys are making huge decisions, cyber physical systems that will affect and mediate organizational life, but they don't have any, kind of theoretical knowledge of the people living in those organizations. So go out and speak to those people, see what the issues are, and see if we can start to, solve some of these practical problems. Now, you might want to explore different philosophical frameworks, consequentialism, deontology, virtue ethics. There's lots of different ways to start framing these different frameworks about how you solve these ethical problems of AI. And we're agnostic. They're all interesting, they're all valuable, and I think they can really bring some richness to AI. The other one thing I would say is I would really love to see some interesting empirical cases. And what I mean by that are cases that go beyond the obvious examples that are often used quite frequently in these studies. So autonomous vehicles and the same case studies. So if we can get non-obvious examples now that AI has diffused across organizations more, and you start to see AI being used in companies that aren't even particularly high tech, I think that's where we'll get a lot of rich new cases that will really shine a light on AI as it's been experienced in organizations. So that's hopefully what we're going to see in this section. And I'll pass over now to Rick. Hopefully.
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dominic. That as you folks get the sense as we're talking, and certainly we hope that you do, is that we're looking to cast a very wide net and yet leave the distinctive imprint of managerial and organizational studies on the domain here. And there are a number of ways in which there is a unique conceptual framing, multiplicity of framing, as Stella put very articulately, and a wide array that's seen in the chat box, that a lot of questions pertaining to conceptual agnosticism, methodological research design agnosticism. And it's not for a lack of care or concern about this, but it is the kind of thing that perhaps more than or as much as any topic that I've recently seen, that there is not a single division of Academy of Management that does not find some measure of influence that's exerted through this. And it's extraordinarily exciting, but it's also quite daunting. And I think that it is very much the goal to be able to look at this in through a multiplicity of lenses in this regard. One key part of this then, and a suggested topic, and by suggesting these, we're not at all censoring or demarcating thick black lines around the four of these topics, but hopefully they're suggestive, and all four of us have sought to emphasize the extent to which these are suggestive of the kinds of things that can be readily entertained. But one of these also for which organizational managerial scholars are able to bring a unique perspective pertains to societal implications. This is really important if for reasons that each of my three partners in crime here have emphasized, that this is a topic area that for several generations now just oozes in hyperbole. And it goes both directions. That David and I have a paper currently, a large study taking a look at what's known as AI winters, and the idea of these rising expectations that suddenly fall off a cliff, this idea of overpromising, under-delivering. And it's not one to judge either positively or negatively, but it does suggest that there's this successive waves of hyperbole that tend to be have tended to characterize particularly AI in the form of machine learning and deep learning in more recent years for this. And this invites, from the perspective of our own field, structural critiques of AI, and some of them are pretty edgy, and there have been very effective and somewhat entertaining treatments of AI, even through critical lenses such as Marxism, and some interesting work more recently through what we might call neo-Luddite perspectives. And there are very few historical groups that are less well understood than the Luddites, and that there's a certain pejorative, foot dragging, somewhat backwards characterization that comes with it. But in fact, it's a remarkable, just by way of analogy, it's a remarkable historical instance of a group of people that were really getting to the DNA of technology's effect on broader society. And for any of you who know, certainly from UK, and we're required to study national history extensively, that the movement started in Nottingham in the 1800s, named after Ned Ludd, just quite a remarkable, if in some ways legendary weaver. And the concern was that the skilled craftspeople of the time were going to have their skill and capabilities and the ingenuity and know-how crowded out by the machines. And so literally in their manifesto, they had this remarkable language that they saw that society and capitalists and manufacturers were using technology, and this is a quote from them, in a fraudulent and deceitful fashion. And that's fascinating, because there is a great concern now that intelligent agents have a effect that may not be completely controllable by all different levels of analysis. And to reflect on that. That being said, the structural critiques of AI are not useful if they solely focus on either a valorization or a vilification. And David used the word paradox early on, and this is part of what we're trying to confront and work through. And so, for example, that there's no question but that there are life-saving, and David brought up a wonderful specific company example of that, in which AI has literally life-saving impact. Including healthcare technologies that allows us to accelerate the delivery and precision of medical cure. In this case, diagnosis for David, it was compound screening and drug discovery, but also in terms of being able to deliver, diagnose, and be able to treat symptoms in a more targeted, effective, and efficient fashion. But side by side with that, there's growing ethical concerns that as you get something, you give up something in this regard. And that as I have here, and I think it's an important counterpoint to this, is the idea that it's the mindset towards technology that needs to be addressed oftentimes rather than the technology itself. And so what we're looking for are balanced perspectives that invite new structural critiques, that not even just going back to social impact theory and things for this, but inviting as I said at the outset, a multiplicity of perspectives that help to get there. And some of the key questions then that this invites ends up taking a look at both favorable and unfavorable societal impacts. One of those can be, where do the unintended positive and negative impacts exist? And again, I think that the methodologies and conceptual framing of organizational and managerial scholars are particularly germane to this. And along with this then, to ensure constructive debate and thorough coverage, that we would invite individuals, groups, co-authors, and manuscripts that break new ground with respect to critically evaluating the tangible capability. This goes back to this element of hyperbole. What are the bona fide impacts and benefits, and what are they to be in the future? And to especially put this in a new theoretical perspective, that so much of the AI literature is primarily descriptive. And that's really, really valuable for us to agree on the categorization and the uniqueness and cross connections of those categories. But there's something that is a little bit vapid about that from our perspective as well of the field. And that what we want to do is to find the middle ground that neither solely valorizes or vilifies, but separates, understands, and then theorizes those. Also then assessing the manner in which AI may be enabling harmful new forms. It's getting at a little bit with facets of the neo-Ludditism, and far from looking at it in a pejorative context, that it's remarkable historical parallel, perhaps in some respects. And then finally, exploring ecological and sustainability costs of AI. And I give Dominic great credit for this, just off my radar. And initially here to say, oh, well, that's going to be something that perhaps is important, but somewhat subordinate. But in fact, this is an emerging domain that is extraordinarily important in and of itself, and it relates to some extent with this element of the unintended negative impacts over time. And so for individuals who can do a deep dive in this particular area, there is nothing really that has brought the threads together on this, and it'd be very exciting to see work emerge to accomplish that. Thank you, Dom.
You're on mute, Dom, sorry.
Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, so before we move on to the questions, what I wanted to do was just give our colleagues from Journal of Management Studies a chance just to briefly introduce the journal and talk a bit more about process. So I'm going to hand over to Christina now, who will talk through things.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you so much. Yes, and I'll just ask you to pass on the slides if that's okay. So I'm going to spend probably 5 minutes only with the purpose of introducing you to the journal. I can see that some of you on the call have published in the JMS, so you would of course know very well who we are, what we publish, and how we work with submitting authors. But just for those who are not familiar yet with the journal, we thought it would be useful for you to get to know a little bit about us. So you would know that we are consistently one of the most highly ranked journals in management and in organization studies. We are multidisciplinary journal. So as this special issue as well is a very multidisciplinary, as you've seen so far, we also, in our regular issues, we publish highly impactful papers from across different management and organization studies disciplines. We are currently 15 editors, so there are 3 general editors and 12 associate editors, and we have a dedicated editorial office based in Durham. So Margaret is on the call. You briefly met her at the beginning of the session. We also have an editorial review board and a strategic advisory board with colleagues who have expertise across these different areas in which we publish. Dominic, next slide. So here you can see who we are. We have different areas of expertise. So if you are, for instance, in the HRM or OB area with very much micro focus and quantitative approach, it's very highly likely that your submission will be assigned to me. If you are more in strategy kind of area, then probably Chris or someone else from that area would look after your submission. So next, Dominic. So what makes us different? As there were questions on the chat already, and David has answered most of them very well. We have very inclusive ethos. So as well for this special issue, the guest editors are open and want to be very inclusive. At JMS overall, we are open to a wide range of methodological approaches. So we publish both quantitative and qualitative papers. We publish papers with mixed methods. We have, importantly, what differentiates us from other journals, top journals in management, is that the JMS editors cannot publish in JMS apart from editorials and commissioned content. We deem that that's conflict of interest if I was to submit a paper as a regular submission to the journal. We have another aspect that's very unique, and this is also the case what we apply for special issues, which is that as the paper progresses through the submission, through the review process, at some point another colleague on the editorial board is going to provide their opinion of the paper. So we do that to make sure there is consistency across the papers that we accept, because as I said, we are 15 colleagues, so we have to make sure that the level of the quality of our papers is consistent. Dominic, next. So here we can see the impact factor. As I said, it's one of the most highly regarded journals in management. Although we had a small dip in 2019, but ever since 2017, more or less, we've been steadily growing in our impact factor. And on the next slide, we can see that we have been graded as in top categories across different journal lists. Here we can see the impact factor has almost reached 10, and we've been in the FT 50 list since 2010 as well. Next slide, Dominic. So maybe this is one of the most important points for this session, and for some of you might have questions around this. So we do publish both empirical and conceptual papers, but importantly, papers that significantly advance knowledge across different management and organization studies fields, such as in organization theory or OT that was previously referred to. So OT stands for organization theory, organizational behavior, or OB, HRM, strategy, international business, entrepreneurship, innovation, and critical management scholarship. Dominic, can you click? Yes, thank you. So here we can see what are the type of papers that we are particularly keen to consider. So probably you've heard this before, or those who have published in JMS have come across workiness. I'm sorry, I hear some echo. Can someone is not muted. Can you please mute yourself? Thank you. sorry, it's just, okay, thank you so much. So we are looking for quirky type of submissions. What does this mean? So we are looking for submissions that are surprising, that challenge the existing dogmas, that challenge the existing paradigms, that are unusual, that when I as a action editor see the paper, I'm a bit intrigued about what the authors are trying to do in their paper. So that is one. I know that quirkiness or quirky has different connotations, apparently a negative connotation in North America. I don't know why. I like quirky and quirkiness very much. It really is that element of the paper that I sometimes also call as a wow factor. When you come across a submission and you are just so surprised about what it's trying to do, and you just carry on reading because you want to know more about what the paper is all about. Importantly, all submissions and all papers that we accept at JMS must make a strong value added to theory. So there has to be a clear contribution. Papers need to have this wisdom, they significantly advance knowledge in the field. And of course, importantly, they must have good methodology, rigorous methodology, or what we would call trustworthy mechanics. And so some of the reasons for rejections are usually because the paper makes unclear or insignificant or uninteresting contributions. Many times all of the three we can see in the paper. They may lack rigor either in theory, so there's lack of precision in theorizing, very weak theorizing, or there is lack of rigor in the methods that are used. Many times papers have very weak implications for management theory and practice, and the lack of rigor and weak implications refer to the question that was asked in the chat earlier around whether doing experiments with students would be acceptable. As a JMS, as a general rule, we are not open to accepting papers with student samples. However, if it makes sense for the experiment to use students because the theorizing is around, the theorizing is matched with the methods that you use, or if, for instance, executive MBA students actually have real life experience and substantial managerial experience, that is something that we could consider. But usually with student samples, you cannot make strong implications for management theory and practice. Also, oftentimes we get papers that are mainly around gap spotting. So some research hasn't done that yet, so we are going to do it rather than really explaining why it matters, why it is important. And also, unfortunately, most of the rejections that I personally have at JMS are around the last point, which are papers that have excellent mechanics, really good methods, rigorous methods, but they are just so uninsightful. I just didn't learn anything novel from the paper. And unfortunately, that type of paper probably can find home somewhere else, not at JMS. And maybe just a few more slides, Dom, about just so that you know roughly around our statistics. So this is the most updated one that Margaret shared with us back in July. On average, we take 6 days to make the initial decision. So if you don't hear back from us, so you would see also obviously on the Manuscript Central updates in your account what's happening with your paper, but around 6 days we take to make an initial decision. If we desk reject, you will hear from us with feedback around why we are desk rejecting, and if we send it out for review, it usually takes 61 days to get the first decision. The rejection at the moment, the desk rejection rate at the moment stands at 64%. And the rejection rate after the first round of reviews is around 20%. And maybe just one final statistic so that you see how competitive it really is to get in JMS. We publish around 4% of submitted papers. Next, also, some colleagues have been asking on the chat around what type of papers we could publish. So for the special issue, the guest editors would agree and amongst themselves what type of submissions they're particularly interested in. But as a general rule, at the JMS, we publish regular articles, which are in fact the bulk of our submission. And this could be both conceptual or empirical, as I said earlier. We also publish review articles. So particularly so when you identify an area in the literature that where you can make a strong implication for future research. We publish essays. So Dominic, you published one essay recently, I remember. So JMSS is our essays where you can be provocative and critical around your area of research. And we publish point counterpoints as well, but which is a very unique feature of our journal. We have one recently published point counterpoint section on responsible research in business and management. So I invite you to visit the web page of the journal to see this most recent point counterpoints. And just to wrap up, just to say that we also do a conference and different workshops. We are in fact going to have a conference in a few weeks' time in Cambridge around repurposing management for the public good. And we also do workshops and webinars at different conferences, major conferences in business and management. And also because this is recorded, Dom, if you can go on the next slide where we have social media channels. So we are on social media. So we have also JMS thematic collections, studies insights blog, JMS reflections on YouTube channel. So I invite you to visit these pages. And the last one, Dom, is on our social media channels. I invite you. We would be very happy if you followed us and followed our updates on the social media. So thank you very much, Dom. This is what I wanted to share very briefly.
Thank you very much. And couldn't be happier to be doing it at Journal of Management Studies. And I noticed a nice symmetry the other day when I was looking through the website. So Herb Simon's actually published in JMS. So it's nice to be having this issue in a journal that Herb Simon's published in. Okay, so we'll move on to questions now. And we'll try and answer as best we can, but if there's anything we can't answer, we'll maybe need to go away and get back to you. But if anyone wants to raise their hand and speak, they're more than welcome. If not, then please put a chat and a conversation in the chat.
Dom, just one quick point. I think earlier somebody asked around how many papers we would publish in a special issue.
Yes.
And I said that it's easier to answer that question here using the microphone than on the chat. And Margaret is on the call as well, who can correct me if I'm wrong here. But at JMS, we don't have, unlike with other journals, we don't have a fixed number of papers that we can actually publish. So we can publish, in theory, as many high quality, highly impactful papers that we accept.
Brilliant, thanks. I'll take the first question here from Oliver in the chat. Oliver, thanks for the session. Any constraints on scale or type of organisations? What if our organisation is small and quartic in itself? Yeah, I mean, that's not an issue. We are looking to move beyond the big corporate settings for AI, AI diffusion. So we're open to any kind of organisation. Arto, would regulation of AI be of interest for this SI, for example, empirical studies concerning the proposed European AI Act? Again, this is me answering on behalf of the team, but they might want to differ. Regulation as it's, kind of practiced and experienced by the organisation would probably be of great interest. More of a kind of legal focus in the actual regulatory mechanisms, maybe not so much. And you'll appreciate these answers tend to be a bit general because there's, degrees with each of them. Co-authors, feel free to jump in.
I would say the only thing I would add to that is just probably needs to be some type of organizational consequence then. I mean, so if you're looking at like regulatory change, primarily we're looking at kind of management organization theory. So we probably want to see some type of important OT management problem that is highlighted in that paper rather than just kind of more of a policy or regulatory question.
Yeah. So if anyone's got a question and they want to share it, please put your microphone on. Oh, sorry, we got a question from JC.
Oh, hi, thanks. This is super interesting and really exciting for the field as a whole. So I kind of have a big picture question, which is, I've had a lot of discussions about to what extent AI is a theory now, is like an area to which we can make contributions versus does it need to be a phenomena in which we apply existing organizational or management theory. So I'm curious for your perspective, both for the special issue and where the field's going right now. Is it becoming a theory in itself?
That sounds like a David or a Rick question.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful question. I think like all things with OT, right? We start with kind of changes. I mean, one of the primary areas that we theorize from is kind of thinking about changes in organizations, and I think AI in particular is a very potent transformative we'll say bundle of technologies. And so I think there is plenty of room to start from a phenomenon or a set of phenomena and kind of extrapolate that to think about theory. I do think that I don't know if I've completely tracked with your idea of AI becoming a theory in itself, as much as I do think sort of these questions about theories of organized intelligence, if you will. I think there are completely new theories of organization that AI itself is going to bring about. Again, for me, the more provocative question tied to that, is I think through these issues, is again this question of machine agency. And again, there's lots of philosophical skepticism of it, but Google just released a paper last week that talked about how would you even identify a computational system with agentic capacities or capabilities, right, to kind of lay the groundwork for it. And so we think about AI as kind of these different alternative intelligences. I do think that there are lots of different ways that we can develop a new corpus of theory that again is thinking about a completely alternative intelligence besides just a human or collective intelligence. So in that end, I do think that there's brand new theories that absolutely can emerge. Whether that extends completely to AI becoming a theory to itself, maybe you and I can dialogue about that later so I can understand a little bit more of your perspective. But yeah, I think it's I think both phenomenon, but also completely new theory are both relevant implications of studying AI.
Thanks, David. Vartui?
Yes, thank you so very much, everyone. Very insightful so far. Might everyone be able to suggest a paper that is a great paper in his or her opinion about AI? So I remember the ASQ paper being mentioned, but like just one paper per co-editor of the special issue. Might you be able to do that? Thanks. So as a kind of blueprint for us, because that's a new field and we would like to, see something about qualitative papers, theory-driven papers, or quantitative papers to have as a kind of example when working on our own paper. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I can start off with that. That's a really good question. I like that one. Okay, right, so I'm going to pick up on something that Christina said earlier about papers not being boring. Okay, so that's a bit of a cause of mine at the moment. And actually, probably the most interesting thing I read recently was the book Atlas of AI by Kate Crawford. So what was interesting about that was the fact that she analysed artificial intelligence not from a narrow domain like most of us do, but she did it over the life cycle of everything that was involved in AI. So she started off with the geological basis of it, looking at the rare earth metals. Then she looked at the labeling of data in third world countries and looking at the kind of abuse that went into a lot of those different processes, right through to the use, and then what happens after AI systems are redundant, the kind of. So what struck me about that was that a lot of us think about these technologies in really, really narrow ways, and you start speaking to very few people when you start getting that narrow. And having a book that opened up the end-to-end process it kind of blew my mind, to be honest. I thought it was just so interesting. So part of this special issue, you'll see we've been very, 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 very broad in our interests and what we're hoping to do. So we're going from Marxism to, kind of all sorts of different things. That's kind of the ethos of what we're trying to do. So plurality, interestingness, all of these different types of things, that's from me. David?
Thanks so much, Dr. Dominic.
No problem.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I will answer it just to say that I have a favorite paper. I've already signaled, but I'll be more explicit about it. But I mean, I'll just want to be careful too within this, that this is not to say that this is, as someone thinking about kind of theories of AI, that I would want every paper to reflect this. But Alex Murray's paper in AMR in 2021 on this kind of conjoined agency and this different perspective, I think is is a fantastic paper, a really great blending of novel theorizing, connecting deep literature on organizational routines with AI. And so I think it's a great example. Again, as I mentioned, it won the top best paper award for AMR in 2021. That's a fantastic paper, and I think there's a lot of the implications of it that are deeply impactful implications, insights in there. But again, that's, I'll say, to some degree more of an analytical approach or logic-based approach to using some different terminology. So papers don't have to be like that to be a great theory paper for this special issue. But yeah, I think that's just a fantastic paper, and one that is a great blueprint. I had my doctoral students read it. It's a great blueprint for how to build kind of novel theory in an emerging area.
Thank you so much, Dr. David.
Thanks, David. Rick?
Oh,
sorry, Stella.
Oh.
When you
No, it's okay. I'm happy to give examples of empirical papers. I mean, you can also find the references in the special issue call, actually, but there's a couple of very interesting papers in the recent special issue of Organizational Science on emerging technologies. One is by Lauren Vardenburg and colleagues looking at predictive policing. The other one is by Sarah Lebowitz and her colleagues on the use of AI by radiologists and how it affected their diagnosis process. And there's also a couple of interesting empirical papers in a recent special issue on artificial intelligence by Management Information Systems Quarterly. One again by Sarah Lebowitz, the other one is by Elmira Vandenbroek and her colleagues on the development of artificial intelligence, specifically for people analytics purposes, for recruitment, the development of recruitment AI. I think those are interesting examples of ethnographic, basically, papers that give us richness of the different impacts that AI can have on the work setting.
Appreciate it a lot. Thank you, Dr. Stella.
Okay, Rick, have you got any?
Yeah, that the extra little spin I would put on it, first and foremost, is that across some of the co-authors, I guess some of it is kind of a shameless, egotistical shout out. So I apologize for that part of it. But Dominant et al. On the ETP is just a terrific primer and looking at it through the lens of entrepreneurship, but it raises issues that are of great interest across the academy for that. And Stella is far too modest to wave her own flag on this. So let me say on her behalf, since she would not step up to that on her own, that what's really cool about the work that Stella's done, including the org-sci that she was lead author on in 2021, is that it finds this midpoint between the technical nature of AI, ML, and DL, and the organizational managerial in a real remarkable way that that I urge folks to spend a little bit of time, even just for some raw brainstorming, in the same way that I've made much of my headway in coming up with new ideas by going to finance and accounting sessions over the years and finding tools that are applied in one respect and bring them back to management, organization, strategy, entrepreneurship. That I think the IEEE proceedings are a remarkable place to do a little bit of brainstorming for folks, and that being able to find in remarkable fashion how Stella, among a handful of other scholars, have found the midpoint that makes it so that we aren't taking a relatively laconic, somewhat dilettante approach to the technology, to amply appreciate what's there, but then to put the manager and organizational scholarly fingerprints on what you have along with that. And so Stella's 2021 mining, spending even an hour sometime in waiting for the dinner to thaw out or something, surfing IEEE proceedings with that. And the third, because I couldn't narrow it down beyond three, is to go back and take a look at the Kellogg et al. Annals piece in 2020. And the discussion section there is quite prescient, but it's also interesting to see how much the field has moved on in the last 730 days, that this is very rapidly changing. And so to seed some of those elements, I think would be real interesting.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rick. We're all blushing now. Christina, have you got any, like, from your role as an editor, have you seen any interesting stuff coming through?
No, not really. No, unfortunately, or not good enough to be sent out for review. So probably there were papers that we desk rejected because of one of the reasons that I talked about sooner. But I think maybe one point, Dom, might be interesting to clarify. So as probably everyone has read the call for papers, and you would have seen that the approach that has been taken towards kind of how we define and refer to artificial intelligence is quite broad, because, as David was saying earlier, it's a field that kind of lacks theory, lacks clearer definitions. So I've come across quite a lot of papers on automation in particular. So just kind of how the automation and the use of technology, particularly in the workplace and in people management, has been used. But Dominic, maybe you would like to clarify whether you would be open to papers that would purely look at the automation as such, or are you interested in artificial intelligence in a different way?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And we had a conversation, many conversations with the editorial team. So what we want to do is focus on artificial intelligence broadly defined, and not just automation. And we don't want to be too technical with our definition, because even the experts, the developers, can't agree a definition of the technology. So broadly speaking, what we want is where there's some kind of kind of intelligent adaptation, where the inputs lead to the some kind of automated adaptation based on the environment. So I think we kind of all know what that means. But if you're in any doubt at all, then you can reach out to the editorial team. But it's just to be clear, we will take quite a wide view. We don't want to lose papers because it's too narrow or too broad a definition of AI. We'll take a big tent approach, but we do make a distinction between just the effects of automation and where there's some kind of intelligence involved. Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay, well, thank you very much to everyone for attending. It was great to have so many people along. And again, hopefully you've got to know us as editors now. We're friendly. We're excited about the special issue. So any questions you have, please do drop us a line. It's not a problem at all. And hopefully we might see you at one of the sessions as well, particularly the in-person one in Washington next year. That'll be quite exciting. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. See you later. Bye-bye.